Hey everyone, and welcome back. As mentioned, we're going to create our main inventory display and showcase all of our great slots on the screen, positioned exactly as we set it up within our uniform grid. The first step would be to complete the function that we did not finish in the last episode, which was the calculate grid position function. So let's open up the create inventory slots function and open up the calculate grid position. I'm just going to bring this to the right a bit, give ourselves some space. It's not going to be large or difficult. There's a built-in function called, what was it? I believe it's division, whole and remainder. Yeah, whole and remainder dividend. Right, so we can now just drag in the index, and the index will be our dividend, and our slots per row will be our divisor. So I'm going to straighten this up, bring it to the left a bit. And for the remainder, we'll need to truncate this and connect this to the column. So you can just drag it in. And for the return value here, this will be our row. Really simple stuff. Okay. And now that will align our grids, our slots, wherever we need it to go. So I'm going to close this slot holder here, and I'm going to create a new widget blueprint. And this will be our main inventory display. So I'll call this WB underscore inventory display. I'm going to open it up and scroll all the way down. Actually, let's add a size box first, and then I will scroll all the way down and drag in our slot holder into the size box. I'll then select my size box and I'll set my width and height override. And before we do this, we will want a canvas panel. So let's wrap this size box with a canvas panel, and the inventory will be placed within this canvas because we want the inventory to just be appearing on the screen and not the entire screen itself. I'm going to set size to content to be true with my size box selected, and I'll anchor this to the right center. So what you can do is highlight it, like hover over it, and hold Control and Shift and then left click. It will align it exactly where you need it to be. And then I will set the position X to be something like -75. So there's a bit of offset on where it starts. I'll then set the width override. Actually, let's set the minimum width override, because there's a possibility we will not get the exact size of the slots, because we'll then need to calculate that manually, and we don't want to do that. So I'll set a minimum desired width to be 500 and the height to be 600. Great. I'll then select the slot holder. I'll rename this to be inventory slot holder, and I'll make this a variable. Now in our graph, we'll need to set this up, initialize this, and tell the engine to display the slot holder's data. So on the event construct, I'm going to get my inventory slot holder here, drag off and search for initialize, and call our function initialize slot holder. Connect this here, and now all we need is a reference to the AC inventory. There's a number of ways we can do this. We can get global functions. We can just get the player pawn, which is the associated player for this UI. What is it? Player pawn, owning player pawn. And then we can get the component by class, and we can access the AC inventory, and this would work. Okay, but let's say you want to make this a bit more modular, then I recommend you creating some global functions. Within the inventory folder, I'm going to add a folder for interfaces, and I'm going to create a new blueprint interface. I'm going to call this BPI underscore inventory system. Then I'll open it up and I'll add a function to access the inventory, and we'll use this exact same interface to access the hotbar and any storage containers that we have. So I'll call this access inventory. The output would be of type AC inventory. I'll copy the entry, select it, and paste the name right here. Actually, let's call this return value. Yeah. Now, within the player character class, so let's open this up. And we will add this interface within our class settings. So I'm going to select BPI inventory system. And I'm going to select access inventory, and just drag this in. So if you want to keep things a bit more organized within your interfaces, then I recommend that you place it in the category called inventory system. Compile and save. And we can do the exact same thing for the interface within our core files. Place it in the category called core files and drag it in. Compile and save. And now in our player character, you can see we have the core files section and the inventory system section. It's really important to keep things organized, especially when you're going to scale up a project really large and you're not sure where or how it might turn out in the end. So we already inserted this. So all we need to do is add a function within our function library. I'm going to add a new function, and this is going to be called get main inventory. The steps to take would be get player character. We'll search for access inventory. We'll just ensure that it is valid. We're going to do something similar like we did for, what was it? The master character. So I'm going to copy all of this and paste it in here. I'm going to connect the target right here. If the input is valid, which would be this object. So I'm going to target. I'm going to delete this get player character node here. And then I'll copy the input text for targets and I'll get it as a local variable. Just delete this one. Plug it up. So if it's valid, then we can use it. If it's not valid, then this tries to access the player character. Now, if the entry interface is valid, then we'll just return. So I'll just drag this to the output, well, to the input to create an output, and I'll make this function pure. And if it's not valid, then I'll just copy this print string from one of the other functions and paste it in right here. I'll replace the text to be main inventory not valid. Drag this into the inventory system section and close everything else. Now back to inventory display, we can now search for get main inventory and connect this. And this time we're going to use the target so that we can get the exact player associated with the inventory display widget. So we're going to get the owning player pawn. And this is done. Now we can open up our HUD class to create this widget. So I'm going to open the full blueprint editor here. I'm going to delete those two nodes and I'm going to create a function. I'm going to call this create inventory widget. I'll drag off and search for create widget. I'm going to select my inventory display. Then I will store a reference to this to be used later. And I will add it to the viewport. Now before we add it to the viewport, we're going to make sure that it doesn't already exist. So I'm going to get the reference, convert this to a validated get, and connect it right here. Then I'm going to connect this to the is not valid pin. So only if the inventory widget is not already valid, then we would create it and add it to the screen. If it is already valid, then we should remove it. But I'm going to create a separate function for this. So I'm going to call this remove inventory widget. I'm going to delete the create node and the add to viewport node. I'm going to drag off of the return value here and search for remove from parent. After remove from parent, we're going to connect this to this set variable here to nullify it. So make sure that it doesn't stay stored into memory. With this done, let's open up our player controller and create our input settings toggle. Right, so I recommend you create an enum for this. So let's head to the enums folder, blueprints, enumeration, and I'll call this E underscore inventory input mode. I'm going to add 4 entries. The first one will be none. It's always recommended to leave a null value. Second would be game only, game and UI, and lastly UI only. I'm just going to bring this to the left. I'm going to close everything else, and I'm going to create a function for setting the input mode. So let's call this function set input mode. We're going to add an input of type E inventory input mode that we just created, and I'll just rename this to be called input mode. Then I'll add a switch. If it's none, then we'll just add a print string in case we made a mistake along the way and call this function but we didn't set an input value. So I'll just call input mode equal none. I'll just hold shift and enter to get another line, and I'll call this error. I'll give this a red color, and that's that. So if you try to call this function now and you did not set an input value, then it will print that you made a mistake, and you'll then know what went wrong. So from game only, we can just get a reference to self, and we're going to drag off and say set input mode. I'll copy the entry text and I'll select game only. I'll drag off again and select game and UI, and lastly UI only. So for game only, we can just connect this. I'm going to make the flush input an input of this function. I'll delete to B, and then I'll copy the input text and paste it in right here to get it as a local variable. Next, I'll drag here and search for set show mouse cursor, and I'll leave this as false because this is game only. For game and UI, we can just connect this right here. I'm going to copy these two variables, connect them up. I'm going to set my in-mouse lock mode to be lock always. So when we show our mouse cursor, it's always locked to the bounds of our window, no matter our resolution. And for the in widget to focus, I'm going to drag this as an input as well. I'll remove the in text, and I'll then get it as a local variable. Right. And then I'll copy this set show mouse cursor variable and set it to be true. Lastly, we have set input mode UI only. I'm going to copy this, connect it up, bring it down, and then I'll set the in-mouse lock mode to be lock always as well. And I'll connect this variable and leave it as true. Great. So let's head back to our HUD class within our core files folder. In the create inventory widget function, let's add a return node. And the inventory display return value will be our inventory display variable. I'll rename this to be return value. Great. So in our RPG controller on the event begin play, we're going to create the inventory display. Actually, we don't need it on the event begin play. We can just do it on an input toggle. So let's do that now. I'm going to head to my input actions folder, right click, input action, and I'll call this IA underscore open inventory. It doesn't need any modifiers. All we'll need to do is add it to our mapping context. Alright, so select open inventory, and for this one I'm going to use my tab key and my I key as well. Now within our controller we can do search for IA underscore open inventory, and then we can get access to our HUD. So let's get RPG HUD, and then call this function off of the started. I'm going to call create inventory widget, and we have a return value, so we can call set input modes, because when we open the inventory we want our mouse to be present so we can click, drag and maneuver the inventory properly. So for the return value we can connect this to the in widget to focus, and for the input mode we're going to use UI only. Good. So now when we hit our tab or I key, it will create the inventory and set our input mode. So let's see. Hit play, and now if I hit tab, you can see the RPG HUD is not valid, and this is why it's really important to set up your print strings. And we're getting an error, which is RPG HUD is not valid, uClass, which is because we did not run an isValid check here. But we won't need to if we already have the print string within our function library. So we're going to add the core files interface to our RPG HUD. Within the interfaces section, we're going to open up Access RPG HUD and get a reference to self. And we'll need to do the exact same thing with our controller class. Good. So now when I try it again and I hit tab, my inventory display doesn't show up, but you can see my mouse is on screen. And let's see why the slots are not being displayed. It's fine. We're creating the widget only if it's not valid and returning the value. So that means we're not accessing something. So let's check our function library. Get main inventory. Okay, yeah. So we did not plug in the return value here. Hit compile. And now if I hit play and I hit my tab key, it should open up the inventory. But let me just bring it up in a larger display for you. So I'm going to select a new window. Alright, so we can see our 10 slots are being displayed. And if we increase this 10 slots, let's say we change it to a value of something like 50 or 60 from within our character blueprint. So let's open up our character blueprint, select the inventory and change this to something like 80. Then hit play. You should see a scroll box appear. So now you can scroll the inventory and you now have 80 great slots. Right. That's it for this one, guys. See you in the next one.